I got bitten by a dog, had to get rabies shots, and ran into my ex. There are bite marks on the inner thigh, and his name is tattooed there too. He sneered. Still haven't washed it off? My name really makes you unforgettable, huh? After drinking too much, I insisted on dancing with a dog by the roadside. As a result, the dog bit me. Now, I'm sitting in the animal injury department, staring at my ex, who I once cheated on, as we lock eyes. I suspect a medical accident might happen, because the sound of Sonny snapping open the ampoule is crisp. He sucks the clear liquid into the syringe, and his eyes above the mask remain as cold as ever. He frowns when looking at me. Pull your skirt up a bit. I hesitated for a second or two, and the man clicked his tongue in annoyance. I've seen worse. Sonny said that getting immunoglobulin would hurt. I didn't expect it to hurt that much. The bite is in a rather awkward place, on the inner thigh. His name is still prominently tattooed there, making it look like I can't forget him. The iodine-soaked cotton ball pressed against the wound, his movements were rough. If you knew, you'd think he was cleaning my wound. If you didn't, you'd think he was angrily trying to rub something off. The needle went in swiftly and without mercy. I gasped in pain. He shot a glance at me. Does it hurt? Didn't hear you scream when you got my name tattooed. After Sonny finished that injection, he disappeared. When the door opened again, it was a nurse who asked me to show my upper arm for the vaccine. I originally planned to roll up my sleeve, but the nurse said that wouldn't work, so I had to take half my shirt off. After all, we're both women, so it's not a big deal to just wear a bra. Where's Dr. Sonny? The nurse was preparing the syringe, and I looked up to ask her. He went to see patients. Is there anything you need? I responded with a simple "oh." I thought he would also be the one to administer the vaccine. With such a fine needle for the vaccine, there isn't much pain, and while pressing the cotton, I focused on the paper the nurse just gave me. It said I need to come back 4 more times for the vaccine to be complete. So, will Dr. Sonny still be? I looked up to ask the nurse but suddenly met a pair of cold eyes. I didn't notice when he came in. He was opening the cabinet where the medicines were stored. His smile wasn't friendly at all. Don't worry, you won't see me. I won't be on shift those days. I froze, watching his long fingers handle the glass bottles. It wasn't until the door closed that I realized, half-dressed, I seemed to have been seen by him. I got bitten by a dog the day before yesterday after drinking, ran into my ex at the hospital yesterday, and today I have to move. I've been busy for a while, just about managing to get the scattered boxes upstairs. I offered the delivery guy a bottle of ice cola as thanks, but he refused. Hey, little girl, no need for that. I really can't stand sweet drinks, too sweet. Too sweet. I remembered how Sonny used to complain about my love for sweet things. Then I thought about the tattoo on my thigh. I had already arranged to have it removed. But removing tattoos hurts so much. I'm afraid of the pain. Damn, what bad luck. I locked eyes with the person who opened the door, thinking his temper hasn't improved. But that face is still handsome, even when angry. He looks good. Sonny, I also think it's unfortunate that we're neighbors now. I looked up at him, and he leaned against the door frame, his eyes downcast. Unfortunate for you. The dirty words that followed never came out. I held out the bag of homemade cookies I had made for my neighbor as a welcome gift. I thought he wouldn't take them. But his long fingers unceremoniously took the bag from my hands. His eyes scanned me with a strangely invasive gaze. What? Others have it, but I can't take one? I fell silent for a moment until he closed the door. It turned out that 2 or 3 years of living in society hadn't dulled his inexplicable temper even a bit. Looking back, my first meeting with Sonny didn't seem like a good start at all. In college, I stood in front of him while getting food. You know how the cafeteria ladies' hands shake, right? Half a scoop spilled all over. I said, "Auntie, you need to give me a bit more." She must have been in a bad mood that day. She shot me a glare and said, "It's all the same." But she didn't know that not only was I in a bad mood, I was also hungry. Unfortunately, when a person is hungry, they tend to go a little crazy. I stretched my head directly through the window and took a bite from her big spoon. At that moment, not only was the cafeteria lady stunned, but everyone within a 5-mile radius was too. Sonny was standing right behind me. He said I must be crazy. If it weren't for the fact that my topic didn't fit his research, he would definitely study me closely. Later, I was kicked out of the cafeteria. Of course, the big spoon that I had contaminated was sent off for washing. I sat alone on the stairs outside the cafeteria, when suddenly a shadow loomed over me. He stood behind me, and I found it a bit difficult to turn around, so I just looked up at him. "Is there something you need?" His eyes were beautiful, even from my awkward angle. Humans are such visual creatures. So when Sonny added me on social media, I had no reason to refuse him. After adding me, he would occasionally share some common knowledge with me. At first, I thought he treated everyone like this. Later, I discovered that he had pinned my name at the top. Sonny from the medical school, always with a cold and handsome face. I thought he was just naturally aloof. But later I realized it was because he didn't like anyone. So, at 4 in the morning, I decided to call him. Sure enough, I heard his pleasant voice, clear and articulate. After a moment of silence, I heard his voice soften slightly. "What's up?" "Sonny, I can't sleep." I was playing in the puddles at the bottom of the dormitory building while holding my phone. "Can't sleep? Go run 10 laps downstairs." His voice was thick, with a hint of nasal tone. It was obvious his brain hadn't fully woken up, and his laugh was a bit scratchy. "Do you want me to hold you to sleep?" "Sonny, come down and play with me." Here's the thing, I actually called everyone in my contacts that night. But that night, only Sonny came down to play with me. And I was happily congratulating myself for having been blocked by most of my contacts the next day. In any case, at 4 in the morning, under a sparse moon and starry sky, I was splashing in the puddles at the bottom of the dorm when Sonny arrived. Upon seeing me, he squinted without holding back. Little crazy. I splashed water at him with all my might, and he leisurely dodged. Upon seeing me, he squinted without holding back. Little crazy. I splashed water at him with all my might, and he leisurely dodged. I said, "If you're really fine, don't drag me out of bed at this hour." He walked to my side, towering over me by a head and a half, looking down at me with his clear eyes. "I'll definitely pick you up and toss you into the river." I pulled my coat tighter around me. The evening breeze was a bit chilly. I instinctively moved closer to his shadow. "Sonny, I'm so excited I can't sleep. My heart races sometimes and slows down at others. Do you understand? My mind is all over the place, and this has been going on for a long time." He quietly looked at me for a few seconds. "Manic episode?" I nodded. "Have you been to the hospital?" "I have, and they prescribed me medication, but I'm still like this. I can't control myself. I feel so high, and everyone thinks I'm weird." I tugged at his shirt, but he had his hands in his pockets, looking rather unconcerned. "Oh. I thought he would at least comfort me." "Sure, it's just a manic episode. I told you before, if there's nothing going on, don't wake me up. I'll toss you into the river." He grabbed my wrist, pulling me along as I stumbled after him. Suddenly realizing we were headed in the wrong direction but feeling inexplicably excited. "Sonny, wait. Sonny, there's a lake ahead." "Where are you taking me?" So he really was going to toss me into the lake. This guy is too serious about his threats. The only thing a bit different is that he jumped in with me. If one of us couldn't swim, tomorrow's morning news would be about a couple from a certain university who jumped into the lake together. Even though it was early summer, the lake water at night was still very cold, and the water quality probably wasn't that great either. I flailed in panic, while he calmly pulled me up from the other side. It seemed like our school's artificial lake was pretty shallow. When near the shore, it felt like he could almost touch the ground. I clutched tightly at the collar of his shirt, which was uncomfortably wet against my body. "Do you have a problem too, Sonny?" His bangs were soaked, and when I noticed, I couldn't help but lift them for him, only to find he was smiling. A man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes looked even more dazzling when he smiled under the moonlight. "Yeah, I have a problem too." The warm breath he exhaled filled my ears. So others find you weird, but I don't. I never understood why Sunny was so intent on liking me. I'm someone who doesn't get recognized, while Sunny is someone everyone acknowledges. This is evident from how he effortlessly wins scholarships, while my classmates avoid me like the plague. So when I boredly poked my rice with chopsticks, I never imagined anyone would sit across from me. Hey, Sunny, what a coincidence. I greeted the person opposite me awkwardly as he unwrapped his chopsticks. His clear knuckles and the way he elegantly split the disposable chopsticks were somehow delightful to watch. Not really, there are so many empty seats in the cafeteria. Why would I sit in front of you? Because I came to find you. He always speaks so directly. I shoved a mouthful of rice into my mouth, feeling his gaze on me but too timid to look up. So I sped up my eating pace to triple. Until I felt a nudge against my leg under the table. Sunny, comfortably leaning back in his chair, was waiting for me to look up at him. Eat your food, it's going to get cold. I tried to deter his gaze, wishing he wouldn't be so impolite with his long legs pushing against mine. But he raised an eyebrow and curled his lip slightly. Even his smile was glaringly eye-catching, and his leg nudged mine again. I like you. How long are you planning to pretend you don't know? It was obviously he who confessed to me first. I sat at the corridor entrance, staring out at the swaying trees, unable to stop reminiscing. Until the elevator dinged, pulling me back to reality. Dr. Sunny, you really made me wait a long time. At the end of spring, this was probably the last season he would wear a trench coat. I have to admit, he really suited it. The rolled-up sleeves revealed a delicate forearm, and casually holding his car keys made his tall figure look even more slender. It was 2 a.m, and his eyes were slightly tired. What's up? He squinted, sizing me up without courtesy. Sunny, my water heater is broken. I stated bluntly. He looked at me for a second or two and smirked. Can't you just wash outside? It's so late, there's no one to open the door. He raised his hand to unlock the door with his fingerprint, and I followed him inside. Is it really that hard to find somewhere open 24 hours? Or you could wash at someone else's place, right? Aren't you good at bringing cookies? But he showed no mercy, blocking the space between me and his front door with his arms crossed. But I live closer to you, and we're more familiar. I had thought that after all these years, he'd seen countless female patients act cute in front of him. He should have developed a heart of stone by now. Well then, don't wash. As expected, he had a heart of stone. I stared at him in shock, slowly brewing my emotions. Soon, feelings of grievance and unwillingness surged up. My nostrils burned, and tears fell in front of him, who could tell how much of it was real. Do you cry the same way every time? Yes, I had cried in front of him many times before. After a while, my throat was hoarse from crying. Finally, he found some shoe covers in the corner of the shoe cabinet and tossed them at me. I sniffled as I grabbed the elastic edge of the shoe cover, struggling to stand. In the end, he couldn't bear to watch any longer and held onto my ankle. He efficiently helped me change into them. His home was as indifferent as ever. There wasn't a single lively thing. I'd believe it if someone told me the place hadn't been lived in for months. The bathroom, go wash. He pointed with his chin to indicate where the bathroom was. But I stood in front of him, showing no intention of moving. What are you planning? Clearly, after not seeing me for years, Sunny had forgotten what kind of lunatic I was. I took a few steps forward and suddenly lunged at him. Who would have defenses in their own home? So he was caught off guard and pressed onto the sofa. Hearing his cold curses in my ear, he instinctively protected my waist as he fell. But he should have been more concerned about himself. I ruthlessly lifted his shirt. The subtle outline of muscles on his abdomen indicated that he hadn't neglected his workouts over the years. The tightness of his waist was undeniably enticing. But that wasn't my purpose today. My gaze shifted to his left chest. There, still adorned with beautifully written letters, was my name tattooed on him. You didn't wash it off either, did you, Sunny? In the bathroom, the shower poured down steaming hot water. I found myself chuckling at his embarrassed expression earlier. The man's face darkened, his long, defined fingers half covered his face as he shoved me towards the bathroom. He slammed the door with considerable force. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter in the bathroom. When my gaze dropped, I caught sight of the tattoo of my name on my leg. Next to the scabbed-over wound, quite some time had passed, and the ink had faded a bit. I remembered Sunny's comment about our tattoos, only dumb couples do such things. Back then, my condition had worsened. For me, mania felt like a tangled mess with blades wildly stirring inside. When it got serious, I couldn't sleep for nights on end, so I'd call him. He was swamped with coursework, often barely hitting the pillow at 2 in the morning before I would call him up. He never got angry. One day, I was leaning over the balcony in my dormitory and told him I wanted to get a tattoo. He paused for a second or two and asked in a husky voice, "Why?" I made a friend who is also a patient, and she mentioned that whenever she has an episode, she gets a tattoo. It really helps ease her anxiety. So I thought, why not try it too? What if it really works? Sunny, I'm being tortured by this inexplicable excitement. During that time, I often shared very negative thoughts with him. I always believed that someone as outstanding as him couldn't possibly understand me, yet I couldn't help but vent my frustrations in front of him. "Okay, what do you want to get?" His tone was still calm, laced with a bit of fatigue. "Your name." He fell silent for a second, then chuckled softly. Have you thought about how much it'll hurt if you want to remove it later?" Why did I want to tattoo Sunny's name? Because in my 20-something years of unremarkable life, he was the only crooked light. Simply put, I just wanted to get it tattooed. It could be anything, but his name was his name. After all, I had no one else to worry about. So, at the entrance of a small alley in the pedestrian street, I found the tattoo studio my friend recommended. Sunny accompanied me, insisting he would just watch and absolutely wouldn't get a tattoo himself. As I lay in the chair, I didn't feel much when the artist began to outline my tattoo. But when the tattoo gun started buzzing, I wanted to escape. Sunny stood beside me, his hands in his pockets, looking down at me with his cold, refined gaze. "Sunny." I grabbed his hand, which felt a bit cold, and he let me hold it. "I'm afraid it'll hurt. Isn't it a bit late to say that now?" His fingers returned my grip, the rough texture lightly tickling me, though his smile was barely there. "Sunny." When I called his name for the second time, he clearly couldn't take it anymore. He lightly tugged at my hand, as if conceding. "Really afraid it'll hurt?" I nodded. In a second or two, he processed the situation quickly and made a decisive decision. He turned around, flipped through a reference book for the tattoo designs, and pointed one out to the artist. "Give me one too, here." It was as simple as asking for another 2 portions of food. I was stunned. I had only meant to act a bit spoiled, not intending for him to get one. But he said to get it, and just like that, it was done. He chose a spot where the skin was thin, so it probably hurt a lot more than where I was getting mine. Once finished, his skin turned red, but he looked like it didn't bother him at all. "All right, couple tattoos." As he put on his coat, he smiled contentedly, even taking the time to ruffle my hair. "Don't complain about the pain, I'm here to suffer with you. How about that?" When I pulled the collar of my clothes as I stepped out of the bathroom, Sunny was leaning on the sofa, reading. His high-nose bridge held up gold-rimmed glasses, making him look more enticing. So alluring and hazy. "Sunny, do you have any erythromycin at home?" It was a redundant question. How could a doctor not have such basic medicine? He looked up, his dark eyes fixated on me. I wore pajamas that I had specifically chosen, and of course, I didn't mind giving him a longer look. However, he didn't linger his gaze for long. He lazily got up, tossing something aside on the sofa, and walked toward the living room, with me trailing behind. It seemed he opened the storage cabinet, and I noticed a huge teddy bear I had given him long ago still hidden inside. He hadn't thrown it away. When I tried to get a better look, he turned slightly to block my view. "Hasn't anyone told you that when you're at someone else's house, you shouldn't be snooping around?" The word "someone else" somewhat flustered my heart. His gaze was downward, seemingly unwilling to look at me, his entire demeanor lazy as he leaned against the cabinet. The erythromycin ointment waved in front of me. What's wrong? Is the last wound still inflamed, not healed? His voice was gentle, melding seamlessly with the soft light, making it even more pleasing. I shook my head, pushing my hair aside to show him. My ear hole is inflamed again, take a look. I had gotten my ear pierced a few years ago, and since then, it had frequently become inflamed. Sonny knew about this. He often teased me for not choosing the right person to pierce my ears. He used to say he could do it better. Sonny, I can't reach this spot. I chased after him, but he took 2 steps for every one of mine and suddenly stopped. I nearly bumped into him. I seemed to hear him sigh. He turned to look at me, bending slightly to get closer, and I could see the small mole at the corner of his eye. Here? He adjusted the ear stud for me. I nodded. He squeezed some ointment onto a cotton swab, pinching my earlobe with one hand while slowly spreading the ointment with the other. When he focused on something, his gaze was serious and deep. If it's still inflamed, you should just take out the ear stud, you might be allergic. As he spoke, his breath sprayed softly against my ears. Sonny. I called his name, and he responded with a light I don't really want to go home tonight. I often spoke without thinking, and as soon as the words left my mouth, I felt awkward. Just like now, he remained silent for quite a while. Finally, he straightened up, a hint of teasing laughter in his voice as he called my name coldly. Do you really have no sense of boundaries in your eyes? Are we close enough for this? Sonny, I wanted to grab his wrist, and he allowed me to pull at him, lowering his gaze. But I found it hard to articulate what I wanted to say. How deep into the night had we gone, that words got stuck in my throat? He suddenly chuckled softly, bending down to tuck my hair behind my ear. Do I really seem like your dog? His dark eyes clearly reflected me, and I saw my helpless shadow within them. I admitted, at that moment, I still trembled. He simply tugged at my hand and tossed me onto the sofa. The high-quality fabric cushioned my fall, and it didn't hurt until he pinned me down. He gripped my wrist tightly. It hurt. So you want me to come over whenever you want, and when you want to push me away, I'm just supposed to play along and roll away? Now that you're beckoning me, am I supposed to bark back? His hands were deliberately restless. It had been a long time since I had experienced something like this, and I couldn't quickly adapt, so I struggled under him while he squinted at me. Suddenly, he lifted my chin. Look at you, you still hate me, don't you? His fingers dug into my chin, which felt uncomfortable. I shook my head desperately. Actually, I wanted to tell him it wasn't like that. I didn't think of him as my dog, and I didn't hate him. But when I opened my mouth, all that came out was a whimper. Damn it, my mania was gradually wearing down my emotions again. I didn't want him to see me in such a sorry state. But he called my name slowly, each syllable lingering on his lips as if he were savoring it. It was you who abandoned me first. You were the one who said to break up. What are you feeling sorry for? Tears that fell were roughly wiped away by him. His movements were not gentle, even brutal. I didn't know why I kept staring at the warm glow of the floor lamp behind him. My thoughts spiraled into that vortex of memories. After getting together with Sonny, the loudest gossip I heard was, how could Sonny from the medical school end up with her? I struggled to make friends and wasn't close with my roommates. On one hand, it was because I had grown used to being solitary. On the other, it was due to someone else's influence. My sister, Zoe. She wasn't my biological sister, as I was adopted. Years ago, Martha was diagnosed with infertility at the hospital, and she brought me home from the orphanage. At first, they treated me well until one day when Martha returned from the hospital looking elated. I didn't understand why she was so happy at the time. She said she was pregnant. Later, when my sister was born, everything I had was taken away. Zoe was biological, so my parents naturally treated her much better than they did me. Since she was the long-desired child, my adoptive parents spoiled her endlessly. So I was always under Zoe's shadow. She looked down on me, envied me, and whenever she did something wrong, she would shift the blame onto me, rallying her friends to isolate me. I had always been not very cheerful, while she was often described as a warm little sun. But behind closed doors, she had told me countless times that I should just die. The cause of mania is unclear, and during my senior year in high school, I spent a lot of my adoptive parents' money seeking treatment. After I entered university, they were even less inclined to care about me. My sister constantly spread rumors about me on various school forums, calling me a lunatic, saying I was mentally unstable. I didn't understand where she got the energy to keep slandering me. When I asked her, she replied playfully, "I'm just bored, sis. Don't think you can have a good life." Later, I let her know I was with Sunny. Of course, she exploded with anger, unable to comprehend why Sunny was with me, constantly calling me to break up with him. But I certainly didn't care about her. However, her continuous verbal bombardment left me mentally exhausted. She kept belittling me, saying I didn't deserve Sunny, spreading rumors about my association with delinquents in high school. My adoptive parents had some money, allowing her to act as she pleased. Did Sunny hear those rumors? I didn't know. But I became increasingly inclined to avoid him, gradually unwilling to have meals with him, not texting him, and no longer disturbing him late at night. Sunny sensed it and called me. "Why are you ignoring me?" God knows how much I wanted to cry when I heard his gentle voice during that call. I told him I was fine. He fell silent for a while before responding with a soft hum. "The rumors about you in the forums are too absurd, don't think I would believe them." He was always like this, indirectly and just right. That's why Sunny was so wonderful. I didn't understand what I did to deserve him, what was so good about me that he liked, or how this relationship could remain so perfect for us. But he really was the only support I had, until my adoptive parents called. Direct and to the point, they wanted me to break up with Sunny. I didn't understand why they were reaching out to a daughter they hardly cared for anymore. Only then did I learn that Zoe had been causing a scene at home. Martha gently called my name, but her tone left no room for refusal. "Your sister is feeling particularly down, just put up with it a little, okay? Your dad and I have raised you, it hasn't been easy, shouldn't you listen to us? Break up with your boyfriend, I heard he's studying medicine and comes from a decent family. You're not worthy of him, so just let go. Your dad and I have discussed it, we believe you two aren't a good match." Yes, I wasn't worthy. I wasn't worthy. Everyone was telling me I didn't deserve Sunny. Afraid of disturbing my roommates with my tears, I curled up in the hallway. Sunny called me 5 or 6 times, and I took a long while to pick up after sniffling. The first thing I said to him was, "Let's break up." He paused for a second or two before responding. "Are you sick?" Yes, Sunny was sunny, so free and flamboyant. He was outstanding. He might have simply noticed how pretty I looked among the wildflowers and decided to pick me up. He didn't know about my family's troubles, he could do whatever he wanted. He even thought that when I told him I wanted to break up, I was joking. Sometimes, while flipping through books, I'd see lines that said that cowards fear even happiness, they get hurt even by cotton. An extremely insecure person cannot accept something too perfect. It turns out that I would subconsciously ruin myself, seeking relief in my own flaws. Since Sunny didn't want to break up with me, I made a choice I would later regret the most in my life. I cheated. Right in front of Sunny. I kissed a junior just to show him, I regretted it the moment it happened. In the end, the junior pulled me close, and our lips brushed against my ear. Regardless, Sunny was devastated. He sent me dozens of messages, all filled with disbelief. He didn't believe I was that kind of person. He said if I told him it was all an act, he would come back. He said there was nothing he could do to save me. But I still told him I didn't want him anymore. I remember the last call he made to me, his voice was hoarse. The emotions in his words were so intense. So when he spoke, I just cried. He said, "You really have the guts." He said, "This is your choice, you don't want me anymore. Remember, it's your fault." But perhaps because he had been drinking, his tone grew thick with emotion. He said, "I beg you, come back to me. Just this once, I'm begging you, alright?" I hung up the phone. And that was it. The person named Sunny never appeared in my life again. The unfamiliar sensation at my waist snapped me back to reality. The firm touch of his fingers was gradually exploring deeper. I suddenly grabbed his wrist. Sunny, wait. The man showed no expression, his dark eyes fixed intently on me. Really brave, aren't you? Spacing out at a time like this. I suddenly relaxed and stopped struggling, allowing him to take advantage, but he paused. TSK, lying down like that? I lay on the sofa, looking up at him. His beautiful hand finally emerged from under my clothes. As a lead surgeon, his nails were smoothly and neatly trimmed. He slowly buttoned the neckline of my nightgown. What's this? Giving your little dog a taste of sweetness? The man lightly pinched my chin, and his cold words sent a shiver through me. Forget it, your little dog thinks you. He finally stood up, looking down at me from above. Disgusting. Summer was approaching, and this might be the last wave of coolness. The late spring rain fell especially cold. I sat in a chair in the hospital corridor, pressing down on a cotton ball. After receiving the second-to-last rabies shot, I hadn't seen Sunny in the hospital as he had said. In truth, despite being neighbors, we hardly ever ran into each other. Even if we occasionally met while taking out the trash, his cold glance made me feel powerless. I was somewhat frightened. The once amazing Sunny now avoided me, and I feared that if I got any closer, he would move away from me entirely. I had clearly resolved to leave him behind, yet seeing him again made me uncontrollably want to cling to him. I knew this was not good, and the situation would only deepen my growing anxiety. With the continuous heavy rain, my worries hit me all at once. Suddenly, a pair of high heels appeared before me. I had heard that Zoe had turned 18, she always loved dressing up, so it wasn't surprising that she wore the high heels she had long wanted. I looked up to meet her gaze, not expecting to see her in the hospital. What terrible luck. Sis, why are you still carrying such a tacky water bottle? Her gaze shifted to the glass cup I was holding, a double-walled glass, which I didn't think looked tacky at all. She always found ways to pick at my flaws. Why hasn't anyone given you a new cup? The cute girl smiled with narrowed eyes, taunting me. Oh, so it's because you don't have a mother? Her mouth was truly insufferable. I really didn't want to engage in this boring provocation, especially since my emotions had been quite unstable lately. In the hospital, I didn't want to deal with her. So I stood up, preparing to ignore her and walk away. But she clearly wasn't willing to let me go. I just saw you. You didn't chase after Sunny to the hospital, did you? The girl kept chattering behind me. What's wrong, sis? Are you still hung up on him? Have you looked in the mirror to see if you're even worthy of him? The doctor probably finds you annoying by now. You know, people like you aren't exactly likable, are they? Orphans often have psychological issues. If I were Dr. Sunny, I'd be scared of you. I took a deep breath. I clearly couldn't control my emotions, so I turned around and looked down at her. So what? What's it to you? Shouldn't you be worried if your stupid brain will even get you into college this year? Was this the aftermath of being with Sunny? I seemed to have developed a habit of cursing when I got angry. Or was it that my frustration had finally reached a boiling point? Zoe was clearly taken aback by my words, standing there stunned for a while. I thought I wouldn't bother with her anymore, but then she slapped me across the face. At that moment, I lost control. My heart raced, and everything around me froze. All I could think about was rushing at her without considering the consequences. Women's fights usually involve scratching and pulling each other's hair. I heard her shouting that I was crazy, and bystanders were reacting to break it up. When I came to my senses, she was crying, her face a mess, and it seemed like she had pulled out a handful of my hair. My scalp ached. I didn't cry, I didn't want to pretend to be pitiful. So everyone around was comforting her. It was a hospital, and the nurses arrived quickly. Zoe glared at me as she called her mom, saying I had bullied her. Then Zoe put the call on speaker. So I heard my adoptive mother, Martha, unleash a torrent of insults against me. She said I shouldn't have been raised, called me an ingrate, demanded that I apologize to Zoe, and told me to never call her mom again. I listened numbly as the crowd of onlookers craned their necks and then got shooed away. I probably had a lot of scratches from her glittery nails on my face, making me look even more like a pitiful lunatic. I realized my glass cup had shattered during the fight, water spilled everywhere, and the shards of glass glinted dangerously. A nurse approached us, asking what had happened and warning us not to make a scene. This was a hospital, not a place to cause trouble. On the phone, Martha was likely comforting Zoe, helping her curse me out. I was too afraid to look up until I saw a pair of shoes appear in my line of sight. Strangely, no matter what I saw related to Sonny, I could always recognize it as his. So he was in the hospital today. He had his hands in the pockets of his coat, looking down at me. I didn't know how to describe the expression on his face as he looked at me. Perhaps it was the mask covering most of his features that made everything unclear. I opened my mouth to call his name. Sonny, is my forehead bleeding? I knew why I relied on Sonny. He had given me love during my hollow 20 years, now that love belonged to him, and he could take it back just as easily. So I looked up at him. He stood in front of me, his eyes cold and businesslike. Go get a number to see a nurse for your wound. I stared at him in disbelief. He sighed. I just stopped by to get some medicine. That meant he didn't want to get involved with me. Don't look for him, don't ask him to treat my wounds. Yes, he had told me before that he found me disgusting. I deserved it, I had abandoned him. What was I even longing for? To have him come back and love me again? I suddenly looked down, the shiny glass shards beneath my feet caught my eye. I had thought it was just my water cup, and even if the cleaning staff had to deal with it, I wanted to at least gather the pieces. But when my hand touched the shards, I suddenly grabbed them tightly. Then I clenched my fist. The initial pain was excruciating, and I stared in shock as drops of blood flowed from my palm, splattering onto the floor and mixing with the tiny shards of glass. Opening my hand, the small pieces embedded themselves into my wound. It hurt so much. But before I could examine it closely, my wrist was suddenly grabbed tightly, fingers white with pressure as they held my trembling hand. I rarely saw Sonny flustered. Bright red blood streamed from my hand onto his skin. He was almost gritting his teeth as he called my name. Even the last syllable trembled. I knew what kind of person I was. I understood my own pettiness, so I sat on the hospital bed, lowering my eyes to watch him as he carefully pulled the glass shards out of my wound with tweezers, bit by bit. My mood lifted slightly. Sonny, you still can't help but care for me. The saline solution stung as it washed over the wound, and I instinctively flinched, but he held my hand firmly in place. He kept silent, not saying a word. When his eyelashes drooped, they cast a shadow over his eyelids, obscuring his expression. I sensed he was a bit angry. I moved my hand, which he was holding, and finally, after I squirmed restlessly for the third time, he looked at me. His dark eyes always gave off a cold impression. What are you fidgeting about? Don't you think there's enough glass sticking into me? What on earth is going through your mind, grabbing glass with your hands? I stared at him, taken aback by the rare anger on his handsome face. He looked really fierce. I lowered my head, glancing at the curtain in the examination room, where a sliver of light was quietly seeping through the gap. Sonny, I had another episode. I reached up to touch my chin, which had also been scratched. It burned painfully when I pressed it. In these past few years, I still haven't been able to control myself. I can scare people when I get anxious. Just now, I knew I shouldn't have fought. But I still can't help myself. Sometimes, I can't sleep at all, even when I'm dead tired. It's frustrating. Luckily, no one's watching me. When you show up, I can't help but want to find you. I know it's my fault, I know you hate me. I know I'm a coward for trying to get your attention in such a pathetic way. So, please be a little understanding. I genuinely didn't know what else to say, and I instinctively looked at his lips. He lifted my chin, and the cool cotton ball brushed against my wound. Understanding? You're quite annoying, to be honest. It was time for the familiar impatient Sonny to clean my wound. His tone was calm and rational, but it suddenly plunged my mood into the depths of despair. Overthinking, overly sentimental. Few people can tolerate your little issues. The gauze wrapped tightly around my palm, and I shivered at his words. Didn't I tell you before that if you left me, you shouldn't regret it? You were the one who broke up with me, right? Coming back now seems pretty cheap, don't you think? Cheap. Sometimes, he really spoke in a heartless and straightforward way. I felt my head hanging low, nearly out of sight, as he pulled at my emotions. He was right, and that made me feel both tortured and ashamed. The person in front of me stood up, the edge of his white coat swaying in my view. I'm leaving. Oh, there's something I forgot to tell you. He looked down at me. I'm planning to move to a place closer to work. It felt like my heart was being dragged downward. I sensed cold sweat breaking out on my skin, and a wave of overwhelming sadness crashed over me, making everything in front of me seem blurry. My nose started to sting uncontrollably. He left without a hint of reluctance. Suddenly, I felt unhappy, but I didn't know why. I stood up abruptly, chased after him, grabbed his wrist, and looked up at him. I pushed Sonny against the door. When he looked at people, he always had a nonchalant attitude. To be honest, it was quite irritating. So I grabbed his collar and kissed him. As I thought to myself, why not go completely crazy? I have no way to control how I feel about someone. I closed my eyes, not daring to look at his expression. It was a messy, panicked kiss. I had no idea what I was doing until I realized, feeling embarrassed and awkward, and then I pulled back. But he held the back of my head firmly. It was as if he had no intention of letting me go. He almost seemed like he wanted to devour me. He seemed so calm, yet the kiss was fervent and overwhelming. I truly felt a bit weak at the knees from his kiss. Just as I was about to fall, he caught me. He leaned against my neck, breathing heavily, laughing. This kiss, was it your idea? Only then did I realize he wasn't angry at all. He hadn't wanted to leave me. It was intentional. I tugged at his sleeve, and he let me do whatever I wanted. Sonny, is it fun to tease me? And you? Would you still run away like before? The smell of disinfectant in the clinic mixed with the scent of laundry detergent on him. I shook my head vigorously. He pulled me into his embrace, holding me tightly. I'm sorry. The little dog just doesn't want to be abandoned by you again. As for the matter of me finding a junior to act for him, Sonny said he had seen through it long ago. He was just angry that I had left him so easily. I hid behind Sonny. He turned sideways, wrapping his arm around my waist and pulling me forward. My house isn't a haunted house. No need to be this scared. Yes, today, I was meeting Sonny's parents. I spent an hour and a half picking out my clothes before leaving. The man who had been leaning against the doorframe waiting for me ended up lying on my bed and falling asleep. When he woke up, he casually ruffled the neat hairstyle I had just arranged. He had a serious and unremarkable demeanor, but I was as nervous as could be. After all, I wasn't the type to win over elders easily. I pressed the doorbell, and after several seconds, I heard footsteps approaching. Then I heard the joyful barking of a dog. When the door opened, I didn't see anyone and nearly got knocked over by a dog. Sonny, with foresight, stepped in front of me, raising his hand to push the dog's eager nose back. A gentle girl's voice came from the other side. Wow, so you're my sister-in-law? Sonny's sister was so enthusiastic. She pulled me by the wrist into the house, and during this time, her dog kept following us, wagging its tail. I had never seen such a scene before. Where's Dad? Sonny snatched my hand back from her, causing her to let out a small grunt. I smashed the knife. Dad went out to buy another one. Sonny's sister really has some skills. You two, the person beside us, seemed to be quite familiar with this situation, letting out a sigh. Are we going to have dinner tonight? Oh, come on, Sonny, if you cook, we'll have something to eat. So, she successfully diverted Sonny away from us. Now, she was looking me up and down, not with a scrutinizing gaze, but with an eager curiosity. This lady, she shaped her hand into a microphone and held it against my chin. How do you tolerate Sonny's bad temper? I was momentarily speechless. If Sonny bullies you, you must tell me. As his sister, I have a way of teaching him a lesson. How old are you? Are you younger than me? Let me tell you, I've always wanted a younger sister. Don't worry, I'm not a gold-digging sister, I'm a sister-in-law digger. Hee hee, you're so cute, no wonder Sunny likes you. Before I could react, my cheeks were pinched unexpectedly, and I sat there, unsure of where to place my hands. The contrast between these two siblings was too stark. Don't scare her. Suddenly, my eyes were covered, and Sunny's cool voice sounded from above. He gently tilted my head back, making me lift my chin. Seriously, are you jealous? I heard his sister's unimpressed voice. I just don't want you to lead my girlfriend astray. His voice suddenly lowered, brushing against my ear, his warm breath sending a shiver down my spine. Be good, don't play with my sister. Just play with me. Did Sunny become a child the moment he got home? Before long, Sunny's dad returned. I had secretly imagined 100 different scenarios about meeting him. Sunny's dad was a well-respected educator in our city. I thought he'd be a calm and stern father, but unexpectedly he was so friendly. The older man grabbed Sunny's sister, continuously confirming if Sunny really brought a girlfriend home. What a lovely girl to be with our little Sunny. I also think it's unbelievable. His sister chimed in. Actually, I knew they were asking each other rhetorical questions, but their voices were quite loud. Before coming to Sunny's house, he had told them about my situation to some extent. So, I was quite grateful. They tried to lighten the atmosphere, taking care of someone as sensitive as me, preventing me from feeling as nervous as I was when I first entered. Their dog kept wagging its tail at me as well. It seemed like Sunny did most of the cooking for dinner. I helped a little in the kitchen, and Sunny told me that his dad and sister didn't cook much. Dad was so excited this morning, telling me he wanted to prepare a big feast for you, but I thought it would be better to order takeout. It's fine. I handed him the chopped green onions and ginger, watching as they sizzled when they hit the hot oil. I'm really happy. Perhaps it was finally participating in the warmth of everyday life. I was no longer the disliked presence. I was finally getting a compliment. I blinked, realizing my eyes were a bit teary. Was it the spicy peppers being too stimulating? Suddenly, a piece of chicken was offered in front of me. Don't cry. He looked down, his gaze as light as always. You know I can't stand to see you cry. After dinner, Sunny and I strolled into the yard. The stars tonight were bright, and his yard was beautifully maintained. The winding stone path led to some mountain rocks, and there were scattered potted plants, lush and green. I bit down on the straw of the milk he gave me. His sister had handed it to me. Is it good? The person beside me raised an eyebrow, and I nodded absent-mindedly. Did you know that milk residue can provide a good living environment for anaerobic bacteria, speeding up bacterial growth? Moreover, these bacteria can decompose proteins and produce gas with a sulfur-like smell. Ah? So what? I listened, dazed, to his sudden science lesson. So, he leaned in, catching a gust of wind, and the moon in his eyes looked like an unscattered galaxy. He lowered his voice and teased. To kiss you with a milky taste, I have to be quick. I suddenly remembered a long time ago when I asked him why he liked me. He simply said he liked me for no reason. I felt unhappy, thinking he was just brushing me off. Fine, maybe it's because you're fun. So he tried to coax me. I wasn't satisfied. Then it's because you're cute. You have a good temper. Your mind is strange. You solve math problems really quickly. I can't stay mad at you. You. He listed so many reasons in one breath. In the end, he gently tapped my forehead. Yes, there's no real reason for liking you. But if I had to say, anything can be a reason to like you. End of the story. 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 End of the story.